It's hump day. Let's have a talk about the trenches right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To another edition of Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our written work at si.com/college/Washington. Thank you for making this your first watch or first listen of the day. And as Lars said in our little cold open, it's Trench Talk Day. We enjoyed the alliteration here. It's always a fun way to go. Quick reminder for everybody that this episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege for a free water bottle with any purchase. You won't want to take your bird dogs off. We promise you. Lars Hanson, we're going to start with the offensive line today. I'd like you to just kind of lead us in here. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it yesterday that now we know Mateo Mele, senior center, 6-year center, is going to be out for the season. We do want to clarify, there is still a chance he could apply, as you pointed out, for a medical hardship waiver. So it's not the end of his career per se, but that process could take a while, and so it's not official. But what we do know is now somebody has to replace his leadership up front. And yes, this was his first year as a full-time starter at center, but he had played everywhere along the offensive line. He was kind of that key, almost glue guy, if you will. A similar version of Corey Luciano, but a guy who actually played more positions than Corey did in his time at Washington. And that's invaluable because when you had a redshirt freshman like Parker Brailsford at center, yes, Parker also has experience, in high school at Saguaro playing guard and center and things like that. But a guy who had been in the program for so long, who had seen the highs and the lows, even before Roger Rosengard and Troy Fatano, the two tackles, got there. So I think he'd kind of been that not undervalued per se, but kind of maybe to a degree underappreciated guy along the line in terms of a veteran presence. And so now as we enter Pac-12 play, as we'll talk about later in the show, how do you replicate that? Because you do have Troy and Roger already this offseason told me that was one of the things they wanted to do is improve on that leadership. And now it's kind of like, well, now you guys really have to, because Mateo's not going to be out there on the field. You can still have him in the building, but he's not going to be that guy and that voice on the field.
So I'm glad you talked about Troy and Roger, because I wanted to say something that I saw this morning on just while I was perusing through Twitter, where somebody said that, I can't remember who, so I apologize to that person, but somebody said, I was going through the PFF grades, and neither Troy Fautano nor Roger Rosengard are among the top 5 Pac-12 graded offensive tackles this year, which I thought was wild, because this offensive line has given up 1 sack through 3 games, and a lot of times it doesn't look like there's any pressure coming off the edges ever, and that was just kind of wild to me.
Well, so not to correct you, but there's the key when you're looking at, we talk about this all the time, it fits the narrative. PFF fits the narrative for certain conversations. And at times it also,
that's our big thing here.
We talked about in the first couple of weeks where they had the number 1 pass blocking offensive unit in the country, better than Georgia, better than Michigan, better than everybody. And then they had the 99th run game blocking. So that contrast, it's like, okay, wait, they're a really good pass blocking unit, but clearly something is, and the coaches have echoed that, right? The coaches were like, hey, look, the first week was dog. It was bad. It was dog blank. I'm leaving out a word there. But it was bad. But then it got better against Tulsa, and certainly got better against Michigan State. I mean, when you're able to combine 2 players for 70 yards, over 140 yards right there, and then you still had a few other guys mixing in as well. So I think you might not have that bell cow that gets you to 120, but the offensive line is improving to where it doesn't matter who's carrying the ball. You're just getting the yards to balance out Penix and not necessarily have him carry literally the entire game.
Right. And I mean, just to kind of echo that, the original point of Fautano and Rosengard being lower than expected, I do kind of hear that there's, with the gap between the grading against the pass and the run, it's understandable, but I was just shocked because they're just both such talented players, and they are the stalwarts on this offensive line now, because even talking about from week 1 before the Mateo Mele injury, Nate Kalepo was the only guy who could be considered a returning starter on this offensive line. Yeah, Julius Buelow and him both had a couple starts, but between them, Julius Buelow had 5 in 2021, which was just such a different time. And then Nate Kalepo had 3 last year. So it was really, a lot of it was Troy and Roger. And for the better part of a year and a half now, the coaching staff has leaned on those two guys as the guys to just kind of lock everything down. And I mean, could you say that they've been anything less than stellar?
No, I mean, they've done it perfectly. I mean, there was I believe it was Logan Tooley Tillman, former college offensive lineman, I believe, played in the NFL for a little bit, had a cup of coffee if you want to say it that much. But he does a good job breaking down offensive line film, almost kind of similar, Jeff Schwartz does, and a few other guys do. But Logan was highlighting Rogers against Michigan State. You could just see Rogers' athleticism. There's a reason why Penix only had 1 sack and it wasn't on the offensive line. I mean, Troy's not the forgotten one, which I'm going to get back to your point about the PFF grade in a sec. But because Penix is a left-handed quarterback, Roger is the left tackle in this offense, even though he doesn't actually play left tackle. So I think that's always kind of something to remember. But Troy has done just as well at left tackle as Roger has done at right tackle. It's just kind of like Roger's kind of the one that's maybe popping a little bit more. But to that point, something about the PFF grade that I wanted to note. So Troy Fautano is tied with USC's Jonah Monaheim. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly, for number 5 pass blocking offensive tackles in the entire country. Here's the problem. It's the run blocking grade where both of them take a little bit of a hit. For sure. Monahan is in the 30s and 40s when it comes to his run blocking grade. So if you go to the overall grade, neither of them are close to the top 20. But I think, again, it's more or less they're getting kind of knocked for the run game. I think the longer the season goes, the more they will continue to climb in that regard while keeping the pass grade high, because I don't think that's going to change. The pass blocking is not going to all of a sudden go away as the running game gets better. That's just not how this scheme works.
Right. And I think that's one of the more promising things when you just kind of look at this offense as a whole and you look at just the way that now that there are some questions along the interior between the injuries to guard Memlar to start the year and Julius Buelow and just kind of everything else that's going on in there with Mateo Mele as well, as we just talked about, just having these two offensive tackles where that's fine. We're just going to leave them out on an island one-on-one with whoever is lined up across from them. And we feel confident that they're going to win more often than not. Just kind of plays the point of, okay, I understand that people are going to worry about some of these injuries along the interior, but when you have this mentality of, unless teams start blitzing really, really often, which is still a horrible idea when we talk about Michael Penix and everything that goes on the back end, that this offensive line is still going to win a whole lot, because we saw what Parker Brailsford can do. He won Pac-12 Freshman of the Week. We saw so much from the interior of the offensive line against Michigan State, where I don't necessarily have any questions about them moving forward, unless it's, can they block 4 guys with 3 people? Which, the answer to that more often than not is going to be no. But, in that case, there are 6 people in coverage and Michael Penix is going to find somebody within a half second that's open, because that's just what this offense has done.
Yeah, and exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. I don't want to even have to say anything, but yeah, it's kind of that sort of thing where, I mean, I don't even know if I could say it any better. Yeah, I mean, but actually, the interesting thing also you have to remember, I think the thing about guard member, the big key here is Landon Hatchett stepping up in guard spot, because I think that is also where the depth. When we saw it against Michigan State, when Landon came in, there wasn't a drop off necessarily. I mean, there is a drop off overall. I think, for being a little bit honest here, Landon still has some growing to do, but he's certainly playing above his. He's playing almost right above the level where he should be at already.
No, absolutely, and he's an 18-year-old true freshman. Like it was really impressive to just see what he could do, and it's something we've hit on this on the show before. I know people hear us say that a lot, but this is one of the, in my opinion, one of the bigger storylines that's going to go unnoticed. If this team continues to just kind of succeed, and we kind of look around the country and just see what the national media has said about this. If you look at what Joel Klatt is saying, or just what a whole lot of other national programs are saying about the Huskies, one thing they're not going to talk about is Landon Hatchett, because you're just not going to see like a whole lot of, that 18-year-old true freshman who's like the number 7 on the offensive line right now has been really, really impressive. That's just not going to happen. But hearing that from Ryan Grubb is always something that, it's the fact that he feels comfortable with that is a really big thing. And, speaking of comfortable, we got to take a second here and talk about our friends over at Birddogs. Birddogs, it's fun because there's a whole lot that I could say about them. And I'm going to talk from personal experience here, because I wear my Birddogs to press conferences now. I wear them to practice. I warm to games when I can. When it's, nice and hot, I wore it to the Boise State game where it's, oh yeah, it's gonna be really hot out there. I'm just gonna put on my Birddogs and go to work that way. And it was great because Birddogs make you look good. Their stretch khaki shorts are designed to fit slimmer through the thigh and the leg to give you a truly sculpted look. And they do the exact same thing as Lululemon shorts, but they fit way better. And one of the best things about them is they use anti-sting sweat wicking fabric that keep you cool and dry all day long. And they're functional for any occasion. Golf, you want to go golfing, you're going out on a date, just an evening out, going to the pool, working out, or if you're going to a Husky game, they're a great way to wear them. And the best way for you to go to get your own is to go to birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege or enter promo code LockedOnCollege to check out for a free Birddogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnCollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you. All right. We said it was going to be a heavy day in the trenches, and now pun somewhat intended there, I guess, if you want to go that route. And now we're just going to switch from the offensive line to the defensive line. So it's Lars, you were the one who you were really adamant, like, oh yeah, I want to talk about this defensive line because obviously there is a lot to talk about, but I want to just kind of give you the floor to open this conversation.
Yeah, well, I mean, ironically, we're going to combine a couple of factors here because we're playing Cal, who has a 3-headed monster running back, which we're going to talk about more tomorrow on Thursday's show, and Friday's show. So that's kind of where we're going to leave that.
Tune in every day.
Exactly. But to preface that means Washington's got to be strong along the defensive line. And one thing that stood out against Michigan State, if I told you that Javon Parker was the highest graded defender in that game, would you be surprised?
Nope. Not at all.
Exactly. And so I think we went into that game with co-defensive coordinator Chuck Morrell saying that he'd become a stalwart, and then he lives up to that going back to his home state. Armand was actually suited for the game, could have played similar to Fatui, where, Kalen DeBoer said on Monday, hey, look, if it really got sideways, we would have put him in there, obviously, but the game went the exact opposite way, so there's no sense in putting either of those guys in that position. But I think as the season goes along, and we'll talk about it here in the third segment, you need to have that depth along the defensive line because Braylon Trice off the edge is doing everything for everybody else. He doesn't have a single sack this year, but because of that, everybody else is allowed to flourish. I mean, when he's drawing 2 or 3 offensive linemen and then a tight end, somebody's open. Jabbar Muhammad came flying off the edge against Michigan State. There's everybody else. Tulsa, right? But there was a couple of the times where we've just seen different guys flying and coming in. And it's like, wait, where's Braylon? And the casual fan, shall we say, the uninformed fan, the fan that's not watching the game as intently
or listening to Locked On Huskies,
that too, would think, wow, Braylon Trice, he had all these preseason All-American, all this, he's first round pick, he didn't have a sack. It's like, look at Will Anderson. He actually last year, when he was going to the draft, his stacks went down from the previous year, I believe. It certainly took a hit. It's like, wait, is Will Anderson not as good? It's like, no, he's just drawing a triple team and almost half the offensive line every single time. Kind of hard to stop, kind of hard to get a sack, but that also means somebody else and a few other guys are having success as a result, and that's what we've seen early in the season.
It really is wild to watch. I've only ever seen that one other time in my lifetime as somebody who's watched the Huskies, forever and ever and ever. The only other time I saw that was 2017 at the University of Colorado, when there's a play that I still have a screenshot of somewhere on my phone. I'll have to post it on Twitter, of Vita Vea drawing 4 offensive linemen that blocked him at different points during the same play. That is the only other time I've seen anything remotely close like this. I'm sure older fans will say, well, Steve Hetman did this all the time. I'm sure. I'm 25. I wouldn't know. I was not around for any of that. But no, and that's something where, yeah, you're right. Where if people look at the box score, they didn't watch the game and say, oh yeah, where was Braylon Trice? He's making all of this happen. And he's still finding a way to put pressure on the quarterback and force them to roll out to the opposite direction and do different things. And he just hasn't gotten him on the ground yet. And that will come. It will.
And also the other side of that coin is then Zion Tupuola-Fatui. I mean, yes, he had an offside penalty, but man, he was. What was it in the NFL where everyone was complaining about the offensive lineman jumping at the snap count and kind of leaving a second early? Zion was almost like an offensive lineman where he was just always right. He almost was like in Noah Kim's head. It was like, you know what? And it still goes back to the first play, not the first play, but the first drive when he had the sack and forced fumble that wasn't called. Like, it was like, hey, look, I'm living rent free up here, buddy. Like, this is my show.
That was the play I wanted to reference because he beat the offensive lineman off the snap so bad to the point where you're almost like, was he offside? And no, he wasn't. That also was a fumble, and I'm going to harp on that till the end of time because the fact that Kalen DeBoer said that there wasn't enough, or that he was told that there wasn't enough evidence there, is just the most horrendous officiating I have ever seen outside of the fact that Cole Strange definitely had a first down against the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football, but I won't go down that route because this is Locked On Huskies. But no, it's something where you talked about the interior of the defensive line, where Tuli Gasanoa is a good pass rusher when he needs to be. MJ Ale isn't necessarily there, but also this is the second year playing defensive line. That's not something that you need to necessarily get into. You talked about Javon Parker, who we're seeing that those flashes come. He's still a true sophomore. Jacob Bandis has improved a whole heck of a lot. That's one guy who doesn't really get a lot of love, and he's still kind of working his way into the rotation. He has improved so much under Inoke Brichterfield. It's not even funny. Just the player that he was in 2021 versus the player that he is now is night and day.
Yeah, and he's kind of, it's almost like the tight end position on the offense where they do all the hard work, they do all the little things. They don't necessarily get the attention. I mean, he's not Aaron Donald, right? He's not that game wrecker, but he does he does almost kind of like what Kalen DeBoer said about Vince Huntley. He just does everything right. He was always in the spot where he had to be. Maybe he's not leading the team in tackles or things like enforcing fumbles and things like that. But I mean, look at guys in the NFL. You don't have like the 10, 15 forced fumbles every year. It's like, no, you'd rather just be that guy that's consistent, maybe give you a sack and a half or maybe a tackle for loss. But either way, he's always doing his job. And that's a guy who's always going to be in the rotation because of that. Because, and I remember even talking to him in fall camp where it's like, he came into that class in, I believe, 2019, 18, whatever. He's been here for a long time. And so it's
he was part of Tuitela's class in 2019.
Exactly. It's kind of crazy to think about. You know what's funny? He's got that tattoo of Latu on his bicep.
Yeah.
That's all he's got to do. If somehow Washington plays UCLA in the Pac, which is not going to happen, but it's going to play them in the Pac-12 championship game. That's all I need for him to do.
Real quickly here. College football season is here, and this season Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel, so you can find it right here on Locked On Huskies. You won't want to miss it. Now, please, I'm sorry, I just got to make sure we get that in there. Please continue your point.
No, you're all good. But I mean, it is kind of crazy to think, and I know our editor extraordinaire and publisher Dan Rayleigh is going to have the story. I believe, or is it you? One of you two guys is going to write about Latu and what could have been. Well, yeah, it is Dan. Is going to write about the certain guys, and Latu is kind of the headliner of that class. And man, you remember all these guys were actually on this team at one time.
It's wild.
Like and then we fast forward. That's my guy. That's my guy.
Oh, dude, me too. I love Puka.
But day one OG for me and Puka, because I remember covering his recruitment out of Oregon. That was one where like everybody always thought like, wow, Washington, how did they pull that off? Could you imagine Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb with Puka Nacua?
I've been like I wrote a Puka story that is up right now on Inside the Huskies, and that was something I didn't put it in there, but I really wanted to. I wanted to just say just in the very last sentence, but I know that some people would have been like, "Come on, we didn't need to hear this." Just imagine if Puka Nacua was like, Puka Nacua was in this offense last season, and Jalen Polk was playing the Jeremy Bernard role, or vice versa. Dude, wild.
It's crazy, but you know what? That's the beauty of college football, and I think obviously we know that Puka went back to his home state of Utah to play at BYU to finish out his career for personal reasons, family reasons, be closer to his mother, and his brother Samson also transferred from Utah to BYU. So it wasn't like Puka said, "Oh, I'm out. See you guys. I'm too good for this program," or anything. It was like he didn't want to do it, had to do it. I do think it was symbolic that he ended up coming out as a rookie showcase in Seattle. I thought that was just kind of hilarious.
Oh, for sure.
Like, because actually he said on KJR one time after he left, he said, "I definitely want to get back up to Seattle." First of all, how the Seahawks didn't draft him is a crime. But secondly,
they took Jason. I like their draft.
But what wasn't Puka like a day 3 pick?
Yeah,
He wasn't a day 1 pick. Wasn't a day 2 pick. Like,
no, you're right.
There's a few picks over, and again, it's easy to cherry pick. I know, but it's like that's kind of one of the things that we've talked about. This is a random segment here, about how many times like NFL teams just way overthink things. And just look at Puka Nacua, look at the body, go talk to his high school coach. The dude deserved to play in the NFL just like Cooper Kupp. And some teams do their due diligence, and some teams don't.
Getting back on track here. Do you have any final thoughts on the defensive line? Because I have one more thing that I want to talk about, and it's something you covered a little bit earlier, just to kind of put a bow on this after our segue about Laiatu Latu and Puka Nacua. Is I wanted to talk about the pass rush that is still possible from the interior with two guys that you mentioned that did not play against Michigan State in Fatu Tuitele and Armand Parker. Because these are things we discussed before. Fatu Tuitele at one point was a top 30 recruit in the country. He suffered with injuries. He still hasn't, really been able to get fully healthy, as we've seen, as he's missed the first 3 games of the season. And then Armand Parker injured his knee before arriving at UW, and we still haven't seen what he's been. But we've seen what his twin brother, Javon, has done, where he was so good that the coaching staff felt confident to burn his red shirt. And of the two coming out of high school, Armand was the more heralded recruit. So I just wanted to wrap it up with that. And, as right before we get into our final segment here today, it's time to remind everybody about the Jase Medical case. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure you have the medication in hand. Jase Medical is simple. They handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com with the promo code LOCKEDON. Okay, this is going to be a really fun one because there's been so much going on in the Pac-12, and I saw some people in the YouTube comments saying, "Oh, well, the Huskies still have, they have to go through Pac-12 play, and that's not going to be easy." And that's very true. That's very true. It's not going to be easy to get through Pac-12 play when Oregon's coming to town, Utah's coming to town. You got to go to USC, you got to go to Oregon State. It's not going to be easy. The Pac-12 was 30-6. Finishing non-conference play is wild. Of course, going out with a bang. RIP Pac-12. But that's something where, okay, with all of the injuries the Huskies sustained so far, but on the other side of the coin, with everything that we've seen from the offense, what we know the defense can do, we kind of saw against Michigan State what they can look like kind of at their peak. I feel like that's fair to say, even though the pass rush can still get home a little bit more often. Can the Huskies survive? Is this something that, that's worthy of being the number 8 team in the country right now?
Well, I mean, they're certainly without question the number 8 team in the country. They should be arguably in the top 5. We talked about that yesterday. But I think, again, I think Softy and some of the people have pointed this out on Twitter, that it's almost like going undefeated in the SEC. It is, in previous years, not this year, because this year the SEC is down in comparison to what the SEC has traditionally been. That's not really a hot take because, let's just be honest, Alabama is not usually what they are. But again, the high standard being what it is. But this team, this conference is deep. I mean, it's the deepest conference in college football, and that's not a hot take either.
There are 8 ranked teams. This has never happened before.
And it's all starting with quarterback play. So the interesting thing about Cal is their script is flipped. It's about the running backs. It's about so each week it's a little different test. Oregon State, they kind of have a little bit of both, right? They don't. DJ Uyunglele is good but not great. The run, Davian Martinez good, great actually. One of the better backs.
He's great. I was going to say that.
He went from good to great. I mean, he had a good season last year. Certainly become great this season. So there's always going to be a test, and I think for Washington, again, it's one of those, on paper, they should be able, even if you end up losing the spread, right? Even if it's Oregon State +3, but you win the game, right? That sort of thing.
Sure.
because at the end of the day for Washington, you just have to win the game. Yes, ideally you want the style points like you see in the first 3 weeks, and especially against Michigan State, where last season you let them back in the second half, right? It was 39-22, when really it should have been, again, kind of 41-7 or 48-10, that sort of thing.
Right.
This season, it doesn't matter. You just got to get the win.
For sure. And no matter how ugly it is, if you win the game, you win the game. That's really all that matters. I don't want to do Herm Edwards, but you play to win the game. That's all that matters at the end of the day. And that's something where, the games against Cal in recent years have been very, very ugly. But one thing that I feel like we saw last year, and as kind of the DeBoer thing, where I've had multiple people just text me and just say, well, I'm still nervous about this game, where it's okay. This Kalen DeBoer team has a different mindset than we have ever seen before, at least in recent memory, about this Husky team, where there were times, especially under Chris Peterson, where the Huskies would play down to the competition of their opponent. That is not something that happens anymore. And I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons that we're so bullish on this team, is because they have this mindset every single week of, we can go out there and we can put up 70 if we really want to. And we put up 35 in the first half. Michael Penix had completed 93% of his passes at one point in the game against Michigan State. Like that's just what this offense can do. If they really, really want to, they are going to put up 700 total yards of offense a week. And I don't feel like that's a hot take, because we just saw them put up 400 and a half and then stop trying. And they still got to 713. Like it's that's what it is.
Kalen DeBoer is what Chris Peterson could have been if his offense was a little more open, right? I mean, I think that was kind of the thing with Chris Peterson, was kind of that old fashioned, yes, you can put it, they put him up in 2016, but as he kind of stayed in, but the longer he stayed at Washington, the tighter the offense got, the tighter the players got. It was kind of like we're playing Bocelli, Fuller, and insert, walk-on wide receiver instead of Puka Nacua as a true freshman. Now, I understand there's nuances to the game, right? For sure. We see it this year. Tayshawn Lyons is getting snaps. Keith Reynolds is now on the depth chart this week. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean, hey, they need to. But again, they don't need to go in. So it's a little different scenario. But yeah, I understand there's nuances. You no block, no rock, that sort of thing. I get all that. But that's what separates Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb, and what Chris Peterson did, where they're both basically the same manner of coach, right? They're the same principle, but Kalen DeBoer is like that, and Chris Peterson is also a dad, but Kalen DeBoer is kind of like that chill dad, that cool dad. Where Chris Peterson is the dad you respect, right? And not that you don't respect Kalen DeBoer, right? But you can come into Kalen DeBoer's house with a pole, kind of a nice zip down and things like that. You go to Chris Peterson's house, you kind of want to come dressed to the nines, and it's like, hello, sir, hey, how you doing? Just because he always kind of commanded that respect. They both do. But I think it's almost like this is the newer age, the evolution, if you will, of what a Chris Peterson offense was, because this offense, it just cooks without even trying.
So this is, I like what you're saying there. And this is what I like. Just the thought that I kept having as you were going through that was, Kalen DeBoer's offense is everything Chris Peterson wanted his offense to be.
Yep.
And it's everything that Chris Peterson's offense was in 2007 back in that day and age. And I think the biggest difference is the point I was making earlier, is the mindset. The mindset is different. Where players under Chris Peterson, it was just all about, it was just, they played really tight all the time. And you could see that every time they played an inferior opponent, especially, and I'm sorry, but I have to talk about it this week. This is a real trigger warning for Husky fans. The 2019 game against Cal. The Lightning game, where everything was, oh man, we're playing so tight. This team is not nearly as good as we are, but we got to execute. We got to execute. No, just go out there and play and have fun and let your guys look. Just this is the real one. As I continue with my just cliches here, just let them cook. That's it. Just let these guys cook. And that is the biggest difference between everything that Chris Peterson was doing and everything that Kalen DeBoer is and Ryan Grubb are doing now. Is they're just saying, yeah, we have Michael Penix. We know how talented he is. We have Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk, Jeremy Bernard, Denzel Boston. We know how talented these guys are. We're just going to let them cook. We know exactly what they need to do to succeed. And we're just going to put them in positions to do that. Not, no. It's not. as a Patriots fan here, I'm going to make one more Patriots reference on the show. It's not the old style of Tom Brady where it's, hey, if he wants you to break you off your route at the 32.5-yard line, you better do it or you're getting an earful. That's not what this is. This is, we know exactly how to pick you apart, and we trust our guys to go out there and get it done.
And actually, to your point, though, I'm going to say that again, because you know where that does come into play, though, and I've sensed it, and I think the coaches have talked about it. That comes in practice. Or Ryan, Jamarcus Shepard's even talked about it's like, hey, if you don't do something, it's not that he's a hard blank, but it's Ryan Grubb knows what it looks like, knows how it's supposed to look, and Michael Penix knows exactly what it's supposed to look like. So anytime, and when you're chasing a national championship like Washington is this year, you can't have a misstep, and that means you could take your foot off the gas when you're up 35-0 because you also know the talent of the room. If somehow the defense allows a couple of touchdowns, you're like, okay, hang on, wait, you got to start the car back up. Okay, cool, Mike, boom, back. Okay, cool, we're done. Like, game's over. That sort of thing.
You're right, because we've seen that already at so many. And one of the best examples that I can give for this is last year's matchup against Arizona, 49-39 game, just a complete shootout. That was a super fun game for us to be at. But it's something where they're coming off 2 losses in a row, right? And it's, oh man, all the air is just totally deflated. Lost at UCLA, lost at Arizona State. And it's just, oh man, looks like the season is just basically over at this point. And I feel like there were years past where that would have just carried over, that energy, that momentum. Michael Penix wouldn't go out there and throw for 500 yards. That wouldn't have happened under some of these other coaches. And it's just, no, we're just going to let our guys go out there. We know exactly what we need to do, and we're not going to play tight. We're going to play loose. We're going to have fun. And that really does just feel like the biggest difference between the two.
And that's what the mentality starts when you're the more talented team. Just look at, if you go on a field right now, no helmets, you're just running against the other 11 dudes. Washington can look against any other defense that it faces and says, okay, all right, let's go. Next man up. Let's go. Let's let it rip. It's like a 7-on-7 thing. It's like, all right, you got your 7, we got our 7. Let's go.
Let's have some fun. And Lars, thanks for having a lot of fun with me on here today. And I thank you to all the everydayers for tuning in as you always do. We do truly appreciate your support. Please be sure to follow us on Twitter at @Tomashoff34, at Lars Hanson, and at Locked On Huskies. Check out all our written work over at Inside the Huskies. And be sure to just, wherever you're listening or watching this right now, please be sure to subscribe. That's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever it is, we are on there. Please feel free to check us out. Subscribe, drop us a 5-star review, leave a comment if you have any questions about anything. We try to respond to as many of you as we possibly can. We really appreciate your support, and we will talk to you all on Thursday.